Welcome to Underdog Interviews, 9 questions with field-leading mentors. You've got 2 choices. You can keep listening and you'll learn more about the world, or you can switch off and you're going to know the same amount that you already do. Today it's journalism. We've got an interview with Steve Woodman, a journalist who needs no introduction, so I'll get right to it. Steve, thanks for your time. Thanks for tuning in from Mexico. In your own words, can you give us a background of your career in journalism so far?
Yep, well, I started out, I was teaching English in Guadalajara, Mexico, the second biggest city in Mexico. And I started out in 2014, contributing to an English language newspaper, a local newspaper. So that kind of helped me develop a bit as a writer, and it gave me some practice. And then eventually I started pitching stories to UK or US outlets, and I got plenty of rejections and loads of unanswered emails at the beginning. But eventually I started getting somewhere with those stories, and I placed a few stories in well-known publications, and I was able to kind of build some relationships with editors, some working relationships with editors, like more as a regular thing.
Great. So some of our underdogs, our mentees that we work with are, young people, 18 years old, 19 years old. What would you say to your younger self, knowing what you know now about your career choice?
Well, I was interested in journalism from about the age of 10, but I was hearing that it was a dying industry from about the age of 15. So what I would have done probably is I would have started earlier. I kind of started when I was about 27, 28. That's when I kind of started writing and contributing to these different outlets. Journalism has got kind of a really bad press in terms of job prospects because it's constantly changing and it's very unstable. But I do still think it can lead to other areas, or it can be an interesting thing to have in your CV, even if it's maybe not the thing to go into if you want a kind of 40-year career in the same, working for the same company, because it is constantly changing. But there are definitely skills that you can pick up through journalism that can be transferred to other areas.
Yeah, and you graduated in 2008, and there was a global financial crisis at that time, and you started entering the workplace. We're in a bit of a crisis at the moment with the COVID crisis that's going on. What would you say to people who are entering the workplace now?
Well, it's a little difficult to generalize because this crisis right now is affecting people in so many different ways. For me, in 2008, I was unemployed for 6 months, and then I worked in a boiler warehouse for 6 months, and that wasn't what I'd hoped or been told would happen when I graduated from uni. I would say there's things that you can control and things that you can't control. And, as individuals, we can't really control how long the pandemic lasts. We can't control the economy. But my advice to people that are graduating during this crisis would be to kind of double down on the things that you can control. So you can go to bed at a certain time and get up at a certain time every day. You can control how much alcohol you drink. You can control how well you look after yourself, whether you meditate, whether you exercise. And I would say it's important to focus on things like that and focus on your routine and your own process, because we have to basically surrender to the fact that we can't control the wider situation at the moment. And I think that if you kind of surrender yourself to that, then you can trust that things will get better, and you have plenty of time to pick up the momentum later. But I would say focus on your own process, on your own routine. That would be my advice.
Yeah. And so some of your work has been fairly hardcore. Some people might even say some of your stories were a bit dangerous when you were reporting them. What advice would you give to somebody looking to get into journalism who's concerned about the danger that might accompany that career choice?
Well, Mexico is the most dangerous country for journalists in the world, but the Mexican journalists are the ones that are really targeted. So there's a big difference as a foreign journalist here. I've covered the drug war and I've been to dangerous areas, but I'm not kind of targeted as local journalists are. So there's definitely a big difference on that. That's very important to stress. The things that I've done that have been more dangerous has really been going to dangerous areas where the danger comes from being in that area. It's not because I'm a journalist. But there are a few kind of practical things that you would bear in mind that I have kind of had to consider. So I've do research and ask people about the area before I go somewhere I'm unfamiliar with, and also I would normally check in with someone when I arrive and then check in when I leave as well. But yeah, it's definitely there's a difference as a foreign correspondent. There's a difference.
And out of everything you've done, what's the highlight of your career so far?
The highlight for me was probably a story that I did a year and a half ago about young people in Guadalajara and the hip hop scene in Guadalajara. It was about how in some areas of Guadalajara, some like poorer areas, there's a bit of a competition for the attention of young people between criminal gangs and hip hop. And so some of the same types of people are kind of, they are at risk of being recruited to join criminal gangs. And it was a story about two rappers who kind of got mixed up in criminal gangs that were living in Guadalajara. That's probably my story that I think is like the best story I've done.
And what's the best aspect of your career and what's the worst?
The best aspect would be finding underreported stories and bringing them to attention and being able to focus on those stories. So, for example, there's a lake near Guadalajara and they found out that a lot of children living in the area have very high levels of disease, around half of them, because of the lake is really polluted. So that would be the best aspect. And probably the worst aspect would be having to spend time on social media when you're kind of not enthusiastic about that. Having to spend time on Twitter when it can be quite an aggressive place.
Yeah. And so for our young underdogs thinking about journalism as a career, thinking about themselves, what do you think the best attributes and values a person has to have, or what are the values and attributes a person should have to go into journalism?
Well, curiosity and persistence are very important. And I probably would say those are kind of things that I'm quite good at myself. I'm kind of curious and I'm able to kind of keep chipping away at stories. And one attribute I say that's very important that I've maybe been able to develop a bit more over the years, but doesn't come kind of naturally to me, is having a thick skin and being able to face rejection and be patient. So if you're able to, as I kind of mentioned earlier, I think if you're able to focus on the process and not on the results, that's really important. I think over time, if you're patient, then that will make a massive difference over time.
So if someone's applying for mainstream type journalism jobs and they keep getting rejected all over the place, what can they do to make themselves more competitive? Or are there other avenues that they can explore to get some experience that might not be the same sort of mainstream stuff that they keep getting rejected from?
Yeah, well, at the moment, it's not a good idea to kind of plot your career path. So you're probably better off not entering journalism if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to work at a national newspaper for the rest of my life. That's not really realistic at the moment. But there are definitely plenty of opportunities still for people that are interested in journalism. And also there's transferable skills. So people could try, for example, looking into going abroad or research places that would be kind of underreported or undercovered. And the best way to research that would probably be just to follow a lot of people on Twitter and try to contact journalists and, do a kind of straw poll of where do they think would be a good place to start out as a kind of foreign correspondent and get some experience that way. You could also just see journalism as or podcasting or, blogging or anything that's kind of related as a project on the side that could make your CV more interesting. So there are still opportunities in journalism. Newspapers aren't doing well, but there's opportunities in broadcast media, film work, and there are transferable skills for other areas. That means that I think it's still very worthwhile, especially if you're really, really, passionate and enthusiastic about it.
The final question, and it's a two-part question. Do you have any regrets? And if you hadn't done journalism, what would you have done instead? What do you recommend?
No one really likes the word regrets, but it's not something I spend time kind of thinking about, and I ponder a lot. But I probably would have started earlier with journalism. That would be, if I had to kind of pinpoint a regret, I would say that would be it. Before I was a journalist, I was a teacher, so I might still be a teacher. And I think for me that journalism's opened up other opportunities. So at the moment I'm kind of doing some security analysis work, and that wouldn't have come about if I hadn't have started out with journalism. So I think the idea that journalism is just like a dying industry and there's no more opportunity at all is I don't think true at all.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for tuning in and speaking to our underdogs.
Thanks for having me.